Hey, check this out. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and any references to people, places, things, situations, and circumstances are purely by coincidence. Nothing should be taken serious. With that said, anything I say, I meant that. If you got a problem with it, catch me in traffic. Welcome back. This is episode 4 of the podcast about nothing. I am your host, David J. And today we have a bit of an expansion. It's exciting. This is going to be a two topic episode. Yes, we're going big time. Follow on Instagram, podcast about nothing. I'm gonna say this right. So I'm front loading a lot of these episodes, so I don't know if by the time I release this one, if I'm using threads under the podcast about nothing page. I might be, because I'm you know what, super sidebar, but I'm really feeling threads. Ever since I really started using threads, I haven't used Twitter nearly as much as I used to. You know, early on, I was like, why would I go to threads if I got Twitter? And then I got on threads and it was all right. People are coming over here. But then I was like, I'll just go back to Twitter because I know Twitter and I like what I like and I like what I know. And then recently I started using threads again and I just haven't really been on Twitter like that. You know, at first the non-linear timeline was a bit of an issue for me. I was like, why can't I just see this in order? Why can't I just see the people that I follow? Why this, why that? And then after a while, I was like, I don't care. You know what? Let the algorithm do what the algorithm do. And ever since then, man, threads is kind of tight. I like it. So, you know, holla at us holla at me on threads, podcast about nothing. I'm sure by the time you hear this, I'll be using that, and that's where I'll be, most active. But of course, Instagram, podcast about nothing. Here on YouTube, podcast about nothing. I'll probably start using this page a lot more for, as I comment on other videos, just so I can hopefully drive some traffic and get people interested, all that good stuff. And we'll see how that goes. But that was our sidebar of the day. For this episode, there's two things I want to go on. First is this whole Spirit Airlines thing. Obviously, by the time you're hearing this, Spirit Airlines has shut down operations. They're no longer running. Their final flight landed in Dallas, and that was it. Shut it down. They went through bankruptcy twice. They tried to, figure some things out, but they just couldn't get right, unfortunately. And I say that as somebody who never flew Spirit. Everything I've ever saw about Spirit made me feel like I will never fly Spirit, whether it was the ridiculous charges for bags or the fact that y'all want to go over there and fight. I was just like, man, I'm not rocking with Spirit. I will take this airline or that airline, and I'll just rock out with what I know, because Spirit was just, man, this too much. And I just didn't have the time. Fast forward, here we are. It is May, and Spirit has announced that they're shutting down. And this happened kind of quick, because just a week prior it was like they're gearing up for shutdown. So I'm thinking, all right, they're going to be in operation, and maybe there'll be a last minute buyer or this, that, and the third, whatever may happen, just passing thoughts. And then, man, it's just like, hey, we're going to pull the plug on this. It's over. I feel bad for the employees who, now they're like, hopefully they get some decent severance. But I mean, everybody will tell you, The job market is not where it's at right now. And if you have a job, especially if you have a good job, you want to hold on to it, because being out there in that market and trying to find a replacement is just not what's up. It's not. And there's even less working in airlines because, it's limited. You're either going to work for Spirit if you were a Spirit employee, or you're gonna go to JetBlue if is JetBlue even still in existence, or Southwest or American, United. It's like it's a handful of places that come off the top of your head, or at least for myself. But I don't know a whole bunch of airlines that are just out there that you can just go work for, because outside of the majors, you have the smaller airlines, and those smaller airlines are smaller for a reason. They're not flying everywhere like the majors. So space is going to be limited for how many people they actually need to have employees, so it's going to be scary hours for those employees over at Southwest, man. I'm pulling for y'all. I hope you land on your feet, because the unemployment life is not where it's at. It's not where it's at. I had to deal with the unemployment world for a short time, fairly recently, like 2 years ago. I got laid off, and I was like, man, where the next one gonna come from? Thankfully I was able to bounce back pretty quick, but man, hey, yesterday's job market is not today's job market. You feel me? And what sucks even more is that this is the end of a budget-friendly airline, which means now, if you don't have a lower cost airline to kind of offset the cost that the majors are charging, the majors can start driving those prices up, because now it's like, hey, we don't have any lower tier competition now. Our lowest cost flight that probably would have been, say, $150 to compete with Spirit, who's going to get you a similar flight, but maybe with a layover for $75. You might weigh that as an option and say, what, I'll pay the $150 and not have to do the layover. Or, some people might say, I'll pay the $75 and I'll take the layover. But it made the larger airlines have to have a lower cost option. Now, if you remove that competition in that market, they could just say, hey man, our lowest cost is $300. What's up? You trying to fly or not? You gonna drive? You trying to go from Dallas to New Orleans? They used to be $60 on Spirit. Man, come on, holla at us. $250 though. It's like, what you gonna do? What's your other option? Unless you're ready to take that 8-hour drive, and that's ass. I know for myself, I don't ever want to do it again. I'm trying to stay retired from the road. I recently had a 3-hour drive, and even that, I was just like, man, I'm sick of this. I'm sick of it. I'm tired of it. I don't want to do it no more. So, man, hopefully there's some kind of turnaround, some company, some group of companies, or whoever that can see some value in what Spirit Airlines was doing and scoop it up for the cheap, and hopefully do something and give another option. That's all it really comes down to, is providing an option, because without it, pockets getting tapped. They getting tapped, and I feel bad for anybody that's expecting to do any travel in the near future, because price is going up. Like Fat Joe said, price going up. Yesterday's price is not today's price. Not by a long shot. Gas going up too? Man, watch out. Now, with all that said, on a more serious note, if you're not aware, here in Texas, there is a guy named James Broadnax. Now, if you're not familiar with that name, James Broadnax was arrested along with a cousin of his whose name I don't have in front of me. And yes, I know I could pause this and go find it and then include that in the recording, but that's not really what's most important here. James was arrested with his brother in 2008 for a double homicide in I believe that was Garland, Texas. Now, James said early on, that he didn't do it. He says he didn't do it, but he didn't offer much in the way of proof or defense against it. He didn't deny being involved in the robbery or attempted robbery at the time, but he would not say that his cousin pulled the trigger. He wouldn't. Now some people might say, oh, he held it down, he didn't snitch, I guess. Well, James Broadnax is dead now because he was recently executed. Okay, if you don't remember, Texas is one of those states that still practices the death penalty and will carry it out. California still technically has it on the books, but they end up just commuting the sentence from death to just like life in prison, and that'll be it. It's like what they were trying to do with Tookie Williams, but he ended up actually being executed nonetheless. So Texas still has the death penalty all the way through. And only recently did James's cousin come out and say, while he's doing life, he said, I was the one who pulled the trigger. I did that. It wasn't James, it was me. Noble, but it's tough to get a court on your side. It's tough to have the judges or jury or investigators or anybody on that side of the law want to come back and redo things and change your sentencing and go all through the hoopla and all the hoops and the changes and all this other good stuff when you're finally taking responsibility this late in the game. So what does that mean? It means, had James said early on, yo, I didn't pull the trigger, my cousin did it, that was him, he shot him, he would be alive now. Why? How do I know that? Because his cousin, who apparently got life as well, he doesn't have a death sentence because the prosecution put it on James. He didn't take responsibility for what he did in this crime, and James has now suffered the ultimate consequence, the ultimate price for not telling the truth, if what they're saying is true. If what they're saying is true. And that's the problem. Because now it's if what they're saying is true. And they're not going to take the time to do full investigations into it at this time. This happened in 2008. It's 2026 now. Your time is short. The harsh truth of it, and it might not sound nice, but here we are. You volunteered to die because, one, he should have been honest in saying who actually did it, and his cousin should have been honest in saying who actually did it. I liken it a lot to the, if you're familiar with the old case of C Murder, and he says he didn't shoot Steve Thomas, 16-year-old boy in the club, regardless of if he was old enough to be there. None of that matters. Things happen to people in places that they, quote, shouldn't have been, but it doesn't make it right that it happened. So don't miss me with that. So there's a guy who was with C Murder at the time, and he's doing life in prison. And at some point he comes forward and says, nah, man, it was me who did it. Well, at this point, now the prosecution is like, you're only saying that so you can try to free him because you got life already. Where were you when that happened? Why didn't you come forward in the beginning? And so now it's like, hey, it's a waste. It's a waste now. We don't believe you. That's the prosecution side of things. We don't believe you. You're saying this now to try to help your friend, but y'all both already doing life for separate crimes. No, y'all both gonna die in prison now. And So it's one of those things where it leads back to the question. Let's just say if what they're saying now is true. Why did you agree to fight this case if you know that you didn't do it? Or fight this version of this case if you know that you didn't do the harshest part of it, taking a life? Because it's like, if you are with your friend, right? You go out, something happens, your friend takes somebody's life, but you get the blame for it. If your friend is cool with letting you go through fighting that case, is that really your friend? If you say yes, then I mean, I guess either you have a warped sense of friendship, or I have a different sense of what loyalty is, and I'm cool with that too. But if that's not your friend anymore, if that's not what a friend would do, then why are you protecting them? To hold it down? To keep it real? To, we don't snitch, we don't never talk to the police, I'd rather die before I'd tell the truth on my mans or anybody else? A lot of these people who go through that, man, they got kids at home, and it's like, so you love your homie, you love the streets, you love the street rules, the supposed street rules, more than you love yourself, more than you love your kids. That's a sad state of being, and all you're left with is families crying behind it, saying free this person, free that person, spare their life. Well, why should the state, and listen, I'm not here to say the state is always right or the city's always right. I'm not here to even be on that. What I'm saying is, why would anybody else spare your life if you will not spare your own? Have some value about yourself. Have some self-care about yourself. All that street rules talk, man, miss me with all that. But I guess it's all some people got to live for. And I guess if it's all you got to live for is what you're willing to die for. Sad state of being, I guess. Well, with that said, until the next time, peace.